Hi, welcome to Mixed Media Creations with me, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill. Follow me on Instagram, www.instagram.com/Creative Katie. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and share the video with your creative friends. Today we have index card a day number 13. I've entitled it Live, Love, Laugh. This one features Mixed Media Technique tag number 19, Fingerpainted Florals. I'll put a link to that video so you can get the full instructions on that technique. Links to the products can be found in the description box below. So here are the tags that I created in Mixed Media Technique tag number 19, Fingerpainted Florals. I did roses, cherry blossoms, hyacinths, and some hydrangeas, all using fingerprints. Again, the video will be in an ICAD or an end card. So I have my usual flashcards here, and one of them had some paint on it, so I'm just repurposing it because I'm not really going to be using the colors that are on there. I plan to collage a gel print right on top of that. So whatever's underneath really doesn't matter. So this is a colored paper collage sheet that I created, and I'm going to put a link to the Mixed Media Technique tag number 18 where I make collage sheets. And I love the blues and the greens, and I used my fine liner bottle to do some scribble writing on here, and I really like the effect. So using colored papers that you have, whether they're gel prints or collage sheets that you've made or just sheets of paper that you've collected, used up leftover paint, is a very quick way to get a background done. Often when you are using leftover paints, you get some interesting color combinations and design factors that you wouldn't get if you were stopping and thinking. So you have all the colors, you have the texture, there's, all sorts of interesting things happening here. But I must admit that I often feel like I've cheated when I use some of my gel prints or colored papers. So I'm just making sure that the edges are adhered, and now I'm putting a coat of gel medium on top. Now, some people talk about gel medium being a resist and it doesn't take paint afterwards. I find that it works rather well, and I've never had an issue with that. Apparently, I like the effect that I get because that's what I keep using. So this is an Art Minds stencil. It came in a pack. I believe there were 2 of them. And this one reminds me of a trellis. So what I'm going to do is, just using a makeup sponge and white acrylic paint, I'm just going to stencil on this trellis pattern. Now my plan at the beginning here was to do the roses somehow onto this background. But I'm going to tell you, that doesn't work out. That doesn't end up being where this card takes me. And that's okay. Sometimes you have a plan going in, and what evolves as you create will change that plan. Go with it. Now, if I wanted some texture here, I could have used texture paste, modeling paste, drywall compound through the stencil, and I would have had more of a 3D effect. I chose not to because I know I was going to do finger painted florals on here, and I didn't want a bumpy surface. So I'm putting on this layer, and I'm giving this a quick dry because I'm going to come back with that stencil and stencil in the parts that were blank, because I want this to look as if you were seeing the green foliage on the other side of the trellis. Now the secret with stenciling is you need little bits of paint at a time. You need to put on layers. So while I stamp into the white acrylic on the side, then I stamp off. And I'm not pressing right down into the makeup sponge to make it ooze underneath. So because I'm stenciling on a considerable amount of white through this stencil, it really lightens the background, and that's something you can use. If you're finding your background is a little too weak, too dark, if you stencil on some patterns with white or lighter colors, you will really lighten the overall. Even splattering with white will work. So I absolutely love how this card turned out right now. Just something about it, it just makes me happy. I like the colors, I like the stenciling, everything. Now, if you don't have gel prints or colored papers that are this color, you can make one specifically for it on paper, or you could paint right onto the card. So here you see my plan is to do the roses. And then I played off camera to get the roses the small size that I wanted. And I decided that I wasn't going to do roses. So I have, I believe, quinacridone magenta, light magenta, and white off to the side. And what I decided to do is paint the smaller flower, 3 or 4 or 5 petal flower. And it's kind of like a miniature rose. With the background and everything, that's how it reads. Although I've used the same technique and I've called it an apple blossom. The apple blossom only had 4 petals. This has a little bit more an overlap. And I'm just using my baby finger because it's the smallest and putting it on. And again, if you want instruction on how to make these florals, a little more detail, please check out my mixed media technique tag number 19, because that's where the instruction on the technique will be more explicit. So I've decided there's my apple blossoms and they're 4 petals. I'm kind of putting this on here and I'm thinking, I kind of like the look. So I've decided I'm going with the smaller, we're kind of make them look like miniature roses climbing up the trellis. So when I dab in the paint, I'm just getting each of the colors, a little white, a little pink, a little light magenta, dark magenta, and, just applying it. And I'm trying really hard not to get over blended. I want all those difference in colors. That's what's going to give it the realism and the shading without having to actually shade. So you saw me kind of practice on a white sheet of paper. And that's a good plan too, whether you're doing the full-on roses, swirl roses, or you're doing these ones, practice on a sheet of paper just to get into the groove. Now I had no real plan here, and in the end, I guess I followed, I kind of made lines of it, and that was not the intent, it's just the way things happened. And I thought about kind of painting in some vines so you'd have these roses climbing up. And then I thought, no, I'm just going simpler. But again, that's something you could have done. Something about this color combination, these soft pinks with the greens and blues in the background, really just, like I said, made me happy. I'm not sure if it's like old, it feels like old vintage wallpaper, something. It really appealed to me. And you can see the different colors that I get. You get some of the darker magenta, some of the lighter, some of the just white. And I do take care to make some of the roses, little miniature roses, kind of going off the page. Now, I love this. Absolutely love it. And, you know, quite honestly, I could say I'm done, turn this into a bookmark, and be quite happy. Now, because I've used rather thick paint, this takes a while to dry. Then I get out my fine liner, and I'm just putting a single dot in the middle. I love this fine liner bottle. I find I use it in a multitude of ways on every project. People ask what I've used in my fine liner bottle. I take acrylic paint, whether it's craft paint or Liquitex Basics, and add water to get the consistency I like, to get the flow that I want. It's kind of trial and error. If you lose Liquitex Basic or something that's heavy bodied, you're going to have to add a little bit more water. Play around. So then I decide to use the fine liner to go around the outside edges. Of my ICAD. Oops. And again, when you get your fine liner bottle, practice. Put some paint in it and practice making lines, making swirls, making dots, making teardrops. Link to my Amazon store will be, and the fine liner bottles is in the description box below if you're interested in getting them. They come in sets of 2. So I went through my selection of quotes here, trying to decide what I wanted. This is for this fairly busy background. And then I decided, you know what? I'm just going to stamp with my Live, Love, Laugh stamps onto this iCard. Now, because I wasn't sure about placement, and I just stamped them onto tissue paper first. And I'm just kind of positioning it so I get an idea of where I want them. And how they fit with the roses. And it just gives me an idea of where I'm going to stamp. So I could use archival ink, but because I want it a little darker, I'm going with acrylic paint, and I'm going to stamp with acrylic paint. I just find I get a better stamp with it. And worst case scenario, if the underpainting is all acrylic, if it makes a mess, you can go in with a baby wipe and erase it and go back. So now that I know roughly where I'm going to put it, I'm just stamping in the paint right on my craft mat, and I'm just stamping the words. And from a distance, as you can see, you're not really seeing the words pop too terribly much. And that's okay. Sometimes they don't have to be front and center. And there you can see a close-up of the finger-painted florals. This stamp I got at Michael's, but I'll see if I can find something, and if I do, I'll put a link in the description box. And just the last one. And off camera, I'm using a baby wipe and just wiping off, getting off that acrylic paint off the stamps. You need to do that if you're using acrylic paint on your stamps. Now, because it's not quite as dark as I would like it, I am coming in one more time with my fine liner bottle, and I'm just going over the letters. Now, if you're confident enough and you can want to just take your fine liner bottle and write words, whatever words you want, go for it. That's an option too. But if you don't like your handwriting or whatever, you can do it this way. It just makes it a little bolder and it stands out just that little extra. Don't have a stamp, don't have a fine liner, type it out, stamp it out on or onto, if you have letter stamps, stamp the words and just glue it on with a piece of paper. Frame that and that can go in there. Just trying to give different options. Make it work with what supplies you have. This is about using your stash, using your supplies that you have. You know, as I go on with the next half of the ICADs, I really want to continue using some of the materials that I haven't used, digging them out, giving them a go. Every time you use them, you get more comfortable with things. There, and you can see how it definitely made those words stand out better by going over with the fine liner bottle. And I often do that, even though I've stamped with my various alphabet stamps or sentiment stamps. So I'm looking at it and deciding, does it need anything else? Thinking I'm done. I even gave the little wave goodbye, and then I decided, you know, I need to edge this in a little bit of black. So I'm getting out my archival, and I have a makeup sponge that I use for this purpose that I store with my archival ink, and I'm just putting black along the edges. Because there's lettering, the black in the lettering, it just adds that one extra layer of interest, just one more way of finishing your project. Sometimes I find that if I don't do this, it feels like it escapes. This kind of frames it. I think this would make a lovely bookmark. Just hole punch it, put some ribbon on the top, and it would make a lovely bookmark. And for that purpose, I would go back and varnish it. I'm very happy with this one. I hope you give it a try using this technique, using gel prints or collage papers as the first layer. Here's a close-up of some of this ICAD, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye.